And let me clear this up for the people that are watching. The financial planning thing, like you're not trying to get people to necessarily do things that they don't want to do, right? From my experience, it was like, what do you want and how can I help you get there?
Correct.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Ask TBG. I'm Beav, and today I have with me our good friend and customer, Andrew Jaffe. This is going to be part one of an ongoing series that is going to be really talking about planning for your future, which is extremely important and I think very underrated and something that's not probably thought of much or brought up or talked about even in public. Like people, these are things that people that are kind of like private conversations that you have at home that no one really, you're not going to the bar and talking to your buddy about and things like that. So anyways, Andrew is a professional in this field, and he's going to help us talk about planning for your future and all the different aspects and different pieces of that puzzle. So let's get into it. Andrew, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background.
Sure, yeah. So I'm originally from Charleston. I think I'm like one of 10 people left in the city that are actually from Charleston, South Carolina. I stuck around here for college, and I actually, when I was in school, had this moment where I realized financial planning or financial world would be a good fit where I can help some people, because I realized people I was surrounded by were just not making the best decisions, right? Mm-hmm. And I kind of had a good knack for math and finance and stuff like that. Yeah, guys like you, exactly. So I did a few years in banking, and then I started this financial planning practice about 10 years ago. And since that time have become a certified financial planner, which is just fancy industry jargon, which means that a lot of the components that people need to be thinking about, I understand how to help those pieces fit together.
Right. Perfect.
So that's basically my background.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you have a new baby.
And I got a new baby.
Very
and some
exciting.
Sweet tactical baby gear swag to go along with it.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
How's that going?
It's good, man.
I heard you talking briefly. You getting some sleep now? It sounds
Not
like?
much.
No?
Very little sleep.
Deprived?
But well worth it.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, so getting into it, now that we know a little bit of your history and background, what are some of the first steps that people need to take into starting that financial planning for the future, and maybe a few of the components, and then we'll talk about those individually on how they play a part.
I mean, I think the first thing I would say is that when you say financial planning, I think there's like the stigma to it that kind of scares people off a little bit.
Yep, it's kind of like a used carsman sort of thing. Like,
yeah. And I think a lot of people, especially young families, think that that's not really for them. It's for people that are older or wealthier or something like that.
Yep. No, that's true, because most people that say, oh, a financial advisor or whatever, like that's like, oh, you must have a ton of money and you got to figure out what to do with all your money because you have so much. Like, that's not the case.
Right. Yeah. We all actually do financial planning every day, whether you intend to do it or not, because it just involves making financial decisions.
Right.
If you're at the store and you buy something, you kind of did financial planning.
Sure.
On whatever you purchased. And so I think the starting point is just to maybe organize those decisions a little bit better by starting the conversation. You made a good point a second ago that I talk about all the time, which is people are either just having these conversations in private, or I would say they actually don't even talk about it at home a lot.
Which you're probably right, and I'm sure you know more about that than I do, but I mean, I would guess that that's probably a very true statement, that people just aren't talking about it enough. They think that they know better internally within themselves, that they have to make these decisions, and I think communication's big there, right?
So yeah, I mean, a great starting point is simply having a conversation with a spouse if you are married, or heck, if you're an individual, just start asking yourself questions about where am I now and where do I want to be in 6 months or a year or 2 years.
Right.
And secondly, understanding exactly where you are. That's kind of assessing where you are financially. You know, knowing the income that you make and knowing where you spend money and things like that.
Right. Assess yourself. So where do you go from there then? You've assessed that, like, hey, I'm here, I want to get here. How do you go about that, right? Like,
I think you find someone to connect with who is a professional in the field.
Right. Everyone needs to find their own Andrew Jaffe.
That's right, your own Andrew Jaffe. Call me. But you know, you can do that in a number of ways. You can do your own research. I think the best way, like anything else in life, is ask people that you know and trust. If there are people in your circle,
Right,
that
referrals.
people that you think, man, this person is a good friend of mine, they have a good head on their shoulders. Let me ask them what they're doing or who they might be using, because chances are they're getting good advice.
Right.
And then go meet with somebody and let them initiate the conversation, because they're probably going to ask you questions that you're not sitting at home, if you are having the conversation, and thinking to ask yourself or ask your spouse.
Right.
They're going to prompt you to be
Right.
thinking about certain things that just
Sure,
don't come up.
and have an outside perspective and things that you might not realize are so out of line that they're like, well, you really need to take a look at this. Like you are,
Right.
yeah. Okay. So with that, is there costs associated with that for an individual to come talk to somebody like that? Like how? So a lot of people. I'm going to speak for a majority of, I think, of our watchers and listeners here, that most of them don't have a huge amount of income, so they're going to be very, very cautious about, like, well, I'm not going to go talk to that guy if it's going to cost me a bunch of money, or if I'm on the hook for a bunch of money just
Yeah.
to talk to him to kind of find out what I need to do from there. So how does that usually work?
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably one of the biggest obstacles in why people don't engage in these conversations or take whatever steps forward they need to, is because they have this perception which is misguided. I would tell somebody, if you were to call up or connect with someone who suggests just to meet with them initially is going to cost you money, I would hang up the phone and call the next person, because any good financial planner is at least going to meet with you initially.
Do like a free consultation.
Yeah, yeah.
Bring some value.
Right. And then how they work going forward might differ from person to person, but it should never cost you anything up front. That
So
first meeting is
any
really
one of these
about-
people watching should be able to contact and meet with a financial planner at no cost to them to find out what they feel like they should or should not be doing, or what direction they should go from there.
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's huge. I think that's
Well, in that first, it's about an introduction to somebody to see if you even jive with them.
right.
And they should be, the financial planner person should be doing the same thing.
Right.
Maybe you're not a fit for them. 'Cause
Yeah, you're gonna have to
philosophies are
mesh.
different or something.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So that being one obstacle for somebody to talk to a financial planner, being that there's no cost to them. What other obstacles might they encounter to kind of get in the door or get their feet wet with it? Anything that might prevent them from taking those first steps?
Yeah, there's probably a lot, but frankly, there's a few that are probably the most common, and one of those is definitely lack of time. Right, we live in a busy world. We've got 1,000 things going on, and I think most of the things that ultimately would be talked about as a kind of a part of this process, most people would say is important to them. They just have a hard time making it a priority, right?
Right.
And so it's just not high enough on that to-do list for them to get around to it. And then 10 years later, it's still the same problem,
I think
right?
this guy's still waiting for an email from me.
Guilty. And then secondly, I would say that when you think about it, man, you're always going to be more interested in immediate gratification. And
Sure.
most of planning is about
Long
some
term.
delayed gratification.
Right.
So that's also a major obstacle. And probably the last one I would say is just, there's so much information out there. Like, how do you even go about sort of navigating through all that?
Right.
It's like if you go to a doctor, right, and you say, hey, I looked on WebMD and found out all these things. They're thinking, oh, geez.
Right, and so here's how I can relate to that, because my history with cars, this to me is kind of a service maintenance repair thing on a car, where somebody comes in with a car, it's got a ton of miles, they never maintained it, it's got a ton of issues, and then it's like, all right, well, here's the list of what your car needs. We're going to prioritize this. Like, this is stuff that needs immediate attention, like right now, or you're going to be sitting on the side of the road, stranded. Here's some stuff that you really need to think about here as preventive maintenance that's coming up and needs to be done. And the other stuff is just kind of like, we'll get to it when we can.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're going to prioritize
Yeah.
it like that.
And then how many times would someone say, well, my friend said that this is probably the issue, and you're
All the
thinking,
time.
is he a mechanic?
Google said so.
And they're saying, no, he's an attorney.
Right.
Like, well, so
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a matter of engaging and trusting someone, and being knowledgeable and feeling confident in whatever's talked about. But at some point, you just got to sort of trust someone's direction.
Right. And let me clear this up for the people that are watching. The financial planning thing, like, you're not trying to get people to necessarily do things that they don't want to do, right? From my experience, it was like, what do you want and how can I help you get there?
Correct.
It's not like, these guys are going to try to push you in a direction of somewhere you don't want to go. It's more of, well, this is where you are, this is what your goals are and where you want to be, so how can I help you get there?
Correct.
It's not like, well, you shouldn't buy that and you shouldn't be doing this and you can't afford that, so and it's like, no, like, I'm going to give you some guidelines and some best practices. You should be saving a percentage of this or doing that and help you put an outline together.
Yeah.
But
Like
you're
a
not.
blueprint.
Yeah, it's a blueprint for their goals, not
Yes.
for what you have in mind.
Correct.
For what they want.
Correct.
So that, I think, is a huge part of it too, is realizing that these guys aren't there to push you to their agenda. They're to help you get to your goals, no matter what your income level is, no matter how much money you think you have or don't have. They might find some really unique ways to help you save money so that you can take that trip, or you can buy that car, or you can buy that house, or you can send your kids to a private school or go to Disney World or whatever. So I think that's a huge part of it, personally, is that no one's pushing you to do something you don't want to do.
Well, and if you get the sense that they are,
Yeah.
you should
Well, either talk about it,
clear it up, and if it's
or that's not the right person for you,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Cool. Guys, there's a bunch more pieces to this puzzle. Tell us about the other pieces of this puzzle and what those are, and we're going to cover those in the next episode.
Yeah, just to sort of lay out the 30,000 foot view of
Sure.
elements of financial planning. Kind of like building a house, you're going to have some sort of foundation.
Right.
And that's going to involve protecting things you can't afford to lose, like with insurance planning.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to involve making sure you have some safe money set aside in case things pop up unexpected. Once that's in place, you can start kind of framing the house in the other aspects. So you can start talking about, how do I start putting money in smart places to build for the future, for goals that are going to happen at various points in my life. And then ultimately, if 20 and 30 and 40 years go by and you've done a great job, then you got to figure out, how do I sort of create a distribution or a way of creating the lifestyle long term that I want, and then maybe pass on things if that's important to you.
Right.
So
Cool. So that's the 30,000 foot view, right? Just a few of those key parts that help put all this together
Yep.
to make sure everybody's got a solid financial base and future.
Yep.
Cool. All right, guys, thanks for watching this episode of Ask TBG. We're going to cover a few of these other topics in the next couple of videos, so stay tuned for those. If you liked this video or got something out of it, please hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe if you aren't already. Hit the little bell so you get a notification when we upload the next video, and we'll see you on the next one.
Here comes the ready or not. Here comes the boys from the side.